Dear Monsignor Sanchez-Sorondo, dear Professor Brown, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank Monsignor Sanchez-Sorondo and Professor Brown for their exemplary engagement to initiate this symposium. I feel more than privileged for having the opportunity to present, together with my colleagues, the work of zoological gardens in this setting, a work which dominated and still dominates my professional life in its best sense, myself having covered different positions in now 7 zoological gardens in Germany and the United States, starting out as an animal keeper trainee in 1977. As you may understand during this session, no zoo can accomplish the needed work for conservation by itself, and consequently, it is impossible for only one zoo director to cover all aspects of the work of zoos. I am very proud to say that it was an easy task for me to convince my colleagues to take part in this special symposium, giving their presentations which emphasize on different topics of zoo work, which are routine for us, but sometimes surprising for other audiences. It should be said at this stage that our zoo community is for sure a community addicted for professionalism, but working so close together over years, I'm more than happy to say that these are not only colleagues who will give the presentation, but also became very good friends over the years. Zoos, how did their roles evolve, leaves me the part in this session to show and to develop with you the change of the appearance of zoological gardens over the time, which is inseparably connected with the change of the internal tasks and external expectations on their work. It will also cover the role of zoos in our more and more technical world, where the people get more and more distance to nature. I want to explain the evolution of zoos in 4 steps. A short history of animal keeping facilities. Second, a change from passive observation of animals to breeding and helping species. 3, change from rivalry of zoos to cooperative breeding. And the first 2 topics partly cover common perception of core roles of zoological gardens, but there are also activities and connections outside this remit, which will be touched in the 4th and final topic, which is called What is a Good Zoo? First, a short history of animal keeping facilities. The history of keeping wild animals reaches back more than 5,000 years ago. Already in the time of the pharaohs in Egypt, elephants, giraffes, antelopes, ostriches, to name a few, were kept, and the Chinese emperor in the 12th century BC established a park of knowledge showing tigers, tapirs, rhinos, and big snakes. What is better known is the keeping of wild animals in the Roman Empire, which were kept either for food or infamously for stage fights with gladiators, prisoners, or each others. Lions, hyenas, leopards, giraffes, rhinos were presented and, in most cases, killed. To give you an idea of the scale of this slaughter, 5,000 or so animals were transported, kept alive, and finally killed for a single event, the opening of the Colosseum here in Rome, 80 AD. The end of the Roman Empire also called a halt to the import of exotic animals into Europe for centuries. Import started again with the Crusaders and the early explorers. At that time, animals were kept in so-called menageries, which were connected to the aristocracy. They were kept as symbols for power and wealth. Concurrently, the growing cities started to keep endemic wildlife like deer and bears, and the ruling classes established big game parks for hunting. In the early 18th century, first King Louis XIV of France incorporated a new kind of menagerie into the designs for the transformation of the Palace of Versailles, in which there was a small central pavilion for the royal family, and the enclosures for the animals were built in a circle around this pavilion. This menagerie was the template for the oldest extant zoological garden, which is the Tiergarten Schönbrunn in Vienna, Austria, established in 1752. Here is an aerial view where you can see this central pavilion that is marked with an arrow, and it's still existing today. In the 19th century, the first zoos were founded which declared themselves as institutions for leisure and education of the people. They were open for all people, not only for aristocrats. The first zoo of this new generation was London, opened in 1828, which advertised itself as a collection of animals for scientific studies and was the first one to use the term zoological garden. Unfortunately, the term zoological garden is still not adequately defined. The definition in the EU Zoos Directive, where a zoo is defined as an institution with more than 6 species of exotic animals and open for public more than 7 days in 1 year, leaves the reader with a lot of room of interpretation and fails to cover the common public perception. But back to the zoo history. The new development changed the reason for keeping animals from status seeking to educating a public thirst for knowledge. The aim of these zoological gardens was a compilation of scientific understanding of the animals, so they strove to collect as many species as possible. This ambition inescapably led to an overstocking animals in inadequate facilities, giving the impression more of a living museum than of a zoological garden. This changed with the beginning of the 20th century, when a new concept of animal presentation was established, first by Hagenbeck in Hamburg, followed by Tiergarten Hellbrunn, Munich, both in Germany. The name behind this development was Karl Hagenbeck, who had the goal to present the animals as open and free as possible. Here's the Africa panorama in Tierpark Hagenbeck, which is still existing. And there's a so-called Nordland panorama, which was renewed a couple years ago. In 1907, he opened the first zoo without bars and used concrete copies of habitats to show the animals in a simulacrum of their natural environment. This progressive action also was the beginning of a change from the animal collections acting as taxonomic catalogues to illustrating animals in a near-natural context, not to forget the predator-prey presentation as seen here with walrus and polar bear. How to keep animals in modern zoos was well explained in the 1956 in the founding document of the zoo I work for right now, the Georg von Opel Freigehege für Tierforschung, also called Georg von Opel Sanctuary for Animal Research. It says that animals have to be kept in social groups, naturalistic exhibits, and wherever possible without bars between visitors and the animals. This was quite ambitious for 1956, but it is standard for zoos today. The first chapter emphasized more on the architectural changes in animal keeping institutions, but the evolution of exhibits also reflects a change of human attitudes to animals as well. Before the drive to scientific inquiry of zoos, animals were brought in to satisfy human curiosity for the tremendous number of different creatures existing on Earth. And zoos operated on the same level as other public spectacles of the time. Primarily, single specimens were imported that lived their lives on show and were then replaced by single specimens when they died. Due perhaps to the enormous expense of importing wild animals one by one, and driven also by the increase in scientific knowledge about the animals in question, the zoological gardens learned to breed the animals and therefore had to create enclosures that could house pairs or groups of animals. The building of this expertise led to the realization that zoos could help mitigate the phenomenon increasingly visible of human activity leading to the extinction of species. One of the first examples was the rescue of the Pear David's deer by the Duke of Bedford, United Kingdom, in the early 20th century. Since a century before, this deer species was known to be extinct in the wild in their home range in China, but was known from the garden of the Chinese emperor in the Forbidden City of Beijing. In the 1870s, a few specimens found their way to the zoological gardens of London, Paris, and New York, where they were kept and bred. After the Boxer Rebellion in the 1900s, where all animals in the Chinese emperor's garden were killed, this species was entirely extinct in China. In the years following, the Duke of Bedford collected all specimens from all over the zoos and bred the Per David deer in his private estate. These few animals created an astonishing recovery to more than 3,000 animals today, including being back in their home range in China. This is a picture from the Haizu Milu Park in China, close to Beijing. This success was led by a single person who had the resources and the desire to make a difference. But figures like the Duke are few and far between nowadays, and we also know that you should not place all animals of one species in one location where the entire species could be wiped out by a single outbreak of disease. This realization, however, was still in the future, so cooperation between zoos started from different sources. It changed now from rivalry of zoos to cooperative breeding. At this early stage of our development, zoo decision makers were just beginning to understand that working together to make a difference for an endangered species was more important than trying to collect every possible species for exhibition to the public. A very good example of this realization is the rescue of the European bison. Here you see a male European bison, which was achieved by a few zoos in Europe together with some private holders who started to work together in 1923, exchanging animals for breeding and founding the first stud book records of any species ever in 1932. The last European bison in the wild was shot in 1927 in Poland. And today, you might even find this species even in Indonesia, here in Taman Safari Park Prigen on Java. At that time, the Swiss citizen, Professor Dr. Heini Hediger, zoo director in Basel, Bern, and Zurich, postulated the 4 pillars of zoo biology, 2 with a local or regional focus, namely leisure and education, and 2 with a more global focus, namely conservation and research. Today, the European Association of Zoos and Aquaria, EASA, runs over 400 population management programs for different species, all in cooperation between a similar number of institutions. It can be said that the early development of zoos was based strongly on enlightening self-interest to ensure that species were available to be shown to the public. But the logic of saving species was becoming unavoidable. One of the best known steps out of zoos, meaning also caring for the animals in their natural habitat, is connected with Professor Dr. Bernhard Schimek, the well-known former zoo director of Frankfurt Zoo. He helped to establish the concept of zoo-led in situ conservation work and made an explicit link between animals in Frankfurt Zoo to their conspecifics in the range country habitats. In the last 25 years or so, zoological gardens have become increasingly involved with in situ conservation, and a lot of projects continue because of the financial and staff support of zoos aim to provide their support in connection with globally acting partners like Species Survival Commission of the International Union of Conservation of Nature, the world's largest conservation organization, which has observer status at the United Nations. As an example, only in 2017, the EASA zoos, with their annual attendance of 140 million visitors, spent 19.4 million euro on in situ conservation, making the EASA zoos one of the most potent donors in nature conservation. So, where do zoos stand today, and what is a good zoo? I have 6 questions and 6 answers. What are the strengths and the weaknesses of zoos? What makes zoos unique? What is expected from zoos? What is a successful zoo? And what is our overall realistic goal, and how can we reach this goal? And finally, who is paying the bill? I will try to answer this shortly. Today, zoos are the most successful leisure destinations almost everywhere they are located. EASA zoos are annually visited by more than 140 million visitors. In Germany, the member zoos of German Zoo Association, the VDZ, have had an annual attendance of over 3 times that of the Bundesliga Football League for many years. Zoos are therefore the most successful cultural institution in most European urban societies since decades. The zoos in each location are visited by people of all social and economic backgrounds, all religions, all nationalities, all education levels, and all ages. Zoos have a huge potential to integrate all these social groups, and they have the means in hand to initiate a change of mind in our visitors to appreciate nature and biodiversity. Let us not forget that zoos are one of the few leisure destination types which can be experienced as family. And why do they have this potential? Because all these people want to see animals. This seems obvious, but I would like to explain this further why I emphasize this point. What are the strengths and weaknesses of zoos? The overall strengths, and as you say today's unique selling point of our zoos, is a professional and practical ability to work, manage, and save small population of wild animal species, especially those of the brink of extinction. This is our main expertise, and no other body or institution or association is able to do that. Our zoos are the ones which do and live practical animal welfare. We have the animals, and with them we can generate empathy, carry out research, and educate the visitors both actively through specialist programs and or passively by piquing their curiosity. And another strength is the attendance. Again, at this point I would like to bring to your attention the multi-local appearance of zoological institutions. Being close to people, being easy to reach, I think this fact is sometimes underestimated, even in our community. I believe that the multi-local appearance of zoos gives people an easy opportunity to reach one of our zoos, so we have the chance to get into the broader society with our messages or missions. This would not be met with a sometimes occurring vision of a few mega zoos which offer the whole scale of animal biodiversity, so that the small collections would be redundant. I think this would be a very dangerous vision for the future of zoos, because I presume that the zoos will lose all the visitors which use zoos only for a few hours of a day and come back more often. Short distances to zoological institutions are important. And in weakness, where our visitors and their interactions with our animals are our strength, they are also our weakness. Judgment of zoos by the public is often based on factors that are not specific to zoos. I wonder, at least in Germany, if my zoo would have dirty walkways, the toilets would not be cleaned, the personnel at the entrance would be not friendly, and having such an experience, you ask a visitor, how did you like it, how he did like his visit? He would say that he will never come back. This so-called standard visitor does not care how much money Opel Zoo did put into in-situ conservation, rescuing the Mesopotamian fallow deer, or gave money to EASA campaigns, or sponsor a professorship for zoo biology. Perhaps, unfortunately, we have to admit that most of our visitors think that way. What makes a zoo unique? Again, the visitors. Besides the animals, a high number of visitors and our skills and our expertise of animal keeping, animal husbandry, animal welfare make us professionally unique. Zoos and aquarium have the expertise to provide high standards of welfare and husbandry to animals in our care, and to use those skills for the conservation of species and the promotion of zoological science, all this in full view of the visitors who we help to learn about the intrinsic value of nature and who we influence to behave more sustainably in their daily lives. If they can see the animals their actions could destroy, they have more likely to reconsider their choices. And what is expected from a zoo? The expectations on zoos differ. It depends whom you ask, visitors, media, or professionals. And by visitors, if you like it or not, most of our visitors expect a pleasant day. Being in nature, doing something nice with the kids, and seeing animals that live large in their imaginations from infancy. At that point, we have to ask us why families decide at home to come to our zoos, being in nature, doing something nice with the kids, and see something interesting. This could they do in different places, but they come to us. And why? Because they want to see the animals. Different animals, dangerous animals, big animals, fancy and unusual animals. Concerning the animals, they expect from us that we provide the best possible welfare, but they still want to see the animals in their exhibit, want to be close, and sometimes even want to touch the animals. Fairly newer is the fact that visitors also want to see proof of our commitment to in situ conservation, but it would be interesting to know how the visitor's decision would be if you give them a choice to spend the money either for a better animal facility in a specific zoo or for an in-situ conservation project. And what do media expect? Concerns for welfare conservation are often driven by media. In our societies, the media is the hungriest beast of all, and zoos are expected, like any other publicly visible institution, to live up to an ideal that is often impossible to reach. Do I have another 2 minutes? Sure. Moreover, the media thrives on division and controversy, so that zoos need to work tirelessly to prove our commitment to both the individual animal and to the species itself. We welcome this pressure. And the zoo professionals have their own expectations. We want to educate visitors on conservation issues in their widest sense. Given that most visitors arrive only with the expectation of an interesting day out, we run the risk that the intensity of our expectations will overwhelm them, and so we need to understand clearly the context in which we operate and work to overcome its limits. What is a successful zoo? A successful zoo, I'm convinced, has a very good bond with its community, both with the public and with the authorities. It is respected for its animal husbandry, for its animal welfare, for its appearance, its attraction, and for the impression it gives to visitors on both animal and leisure level. This is first. Being successful on the global scale should be the aim of every zoo, but if it is not possible, due to the scale of the institution or its community, it should still be possible for that to make a valuable contribution and should not be judged as lesser than the large zoo which already have a global influence. We need all types of institutions to help us realize our responsibility to society. And what is the overall realistic goal and how can we reach it? In my opinion, a realistic goal on individual zoos is to meet the expectations of its visitors, even as those expectations change over the generations. When my parents visited zoos as children, their expectations were different from mine, which are different from those of our sons and will be different from their children. What remains constant is our presentation of animals. In Germany, only 2% of the population has the resources to travel to our animals in their natural habitats. Without zoos, the empathy for animals and the desire to see them protected can never be maintained. It is the goal that we must strive for to reach. And the last question, who is paying our bills? A very important question. Each of our zoos has to pay all its bills at the end of the day. Throughout our community, there are different models how a zoo is operated. As zoo, you do not have to compromise on anything if you are privately owned and earn at least 1 coin of your currency more than you cost. But if you have a subsidized zoo and you are depending on a board which composition is affected by political elections, it is a lot more difficult to place the overall agenda on which we all agreed upon in our associations. And finally, my conclusion. I forgot my conclusion. There is no ideal way, no template which will work for all zoos in the EASA region or even worldwide, but there are essentials which each of our member zoos should be aware of and follow, and therefore associations like EASA or WASA as the umbrella of this umbrella has to be open and not used as a stick. We as zoo professionals, being raised in the Western European context after World War II, have to consider that the different approaches and attitudes towards animals in the different regions of the world. We can offer our knowledge, but we cannot expect that the growing societies in the developing world to have a comparable attitude towards animals in short term. European cultures needed decades, not to say centuries, to develop this understanding for animals. The attitude of our zoos should be our professional expertise and our passion can contribute to a rich and bountiful future for nature and should do wherever possible. We need to be proud of what we have achieved and of what we can achieve, and we must continue the search for ways and means to contribute more. We need to bring our communities into the heart of our mission, transmitting our passion to those who seek it and by entering our institution and seeking to influence those who do not. We need to work together across communities, regions, nations, and continents to form a network of scientifically based, value-driven expertise to protect species and to help humanity to hold nature in their hearts with love. But to say it is even more clear, that works only if visitors are in our zoos. And the director's responsibility, by all adapting, developing, and improving our zoological gardens, it is the zoo director's responsibility and duty to keep a zoological garden on a scientifically responsible and professional level concerning all aspects of animal husbandry and welfare, but also meet the expectations of the visitors. It has to be ensured that our zoos stay regionally accepted. If not, they will be not long-term successful, even if they have a global input. In reverse, if our zoos lose their roots in their regional framework, they will lose their regional support. Consequently, they will lose their financial base, and even more consequently, they will get lost as an ambassador for our animals. And please keep always in mind, there is no proof yet that zoos can survive without living animals. Thank you for your attention, and I finish with one of your Italy's Arks. It's the logo of Parco Natura Viva in Bussolengo. The director is sitting over there in the last row. His logo is Noah's Ark, and I thought that is a nice picture for the end. Thank you very much.
Lovely.